Okay, so welcome again for those of you who have signed in the past few minutes. And tonight we are going to speak about Pesach, and we are going to begin with just a short reminder about Rebbe Nachman's Pesach. Now, Rebbe Nachman's approach to Pesach changed my life. And so, for those of you who this is new to, I hope it also changes yours. And for those of you who this isn't new to, please Hashem, this should be a good reminder. So, how his approach began is, as we know, people keep many chumras, many stringencies at Pesach time, and they are, many are based in custom and halacha, and they're very beautiful and treasured, and there's a special attachment we all have to the stringencies that we keep. They become dear to us. But Rebbe Nachman wanted to improve his observance of the Yom Tov, and he began to think about how he could ensure that no chametz had entered the drinking water, because back in those days, people would get the water from a well, and it was entirely possible somebody could throw in crumbs, or there could be crumbs in the bottle of the bucket that you use to dip up the water. Somebody could mischievously throw in a piece of bread. There were all kinds of possibilities. And he began to worry about it. And he decided that what he would do is he would draw water ahead of time. And actually, many people do have this custom. They used to have it in the past, and some people even have the custom today of buying purchased bottled water ahead of time. And he would set it up ahead of time and make sure that everything was good. And then he began to say, well, I need to draw it from a spring. So the water's coming right from the ground, and I need to get it from the source. And then he realized the nearest spring was far. And so he decided that he would have to camp out and have Pesach in a tent by the spring to ensure there was no chametz in his water. Now, at that point, I think something just clicked for the Rebbe, and he realized that this was not what Hashem intended. Hashem, he reminds us again and again, gave the Torah to human beings, not to the ministering angels. And his approach to Pesach, while it definitely is an approach that's very focused on having yiras shamayim, fear of heaven, and following the halacha, and being careful and so on, he didn't want people to make themselves depressed or sick over the Yom Tov. And we see today that many people find it difficult to de-stress. And so therefore, that's one of the themes of tonight, how to prepare for Yom Tov with joy, and how to experience that joy throughout Yom Tov without having too much stress and fear that we're doing things wrong. And we know that the more we know and study halacha, the more we understand what the laws are, the easier it becomes to let go of fears, because there's a fix for just about everything. As Rebbe Nachman reminds us, that if we believe we can harm, we should believe we can repair. And again, this doesn't mean we should be lax or careless. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I am saying that we should really take what the Rebbe says to heart on this. And I know that this changed my life, because I used to be very, very uptight about Pesach. Before I became Breslov, the community I was close with, part of, my sort of, the people I were close with were also uptight about Pesach. And I enjoyed Pesach almost when it was over. That's when my anxiety about doing something wrong really began to relax. And this is no way to live. This is not what Yom Tov about. Yom Tov is about simcha. And it's about being joyful on Yom Tov. As a matter of fact, the Vilna Gaon, I'm going to quote again, says that the hardest mitzvah, and he's in agreement with Rebbe Nachman, the hardest mitzvah is simcha, specifically the joy of Yom Tov. It's hard to be joyful when you're ordered to be joyful, yet this is how Hashem made us, with this potential to be joyful because it is a mitzvah. So we have to work towards that. Now, I would just like to briefly read just a little bit of an excerpt from Rebbe Nachman's prayer regarding this. I'm going to say this in English. I'm just going to read maybe one or two paragraphs. And this is from his Likutei Tefillot, which in English is translated as the 50th Gate. If you have the Breslov Research Institute version, which is absolutely wonderful, I know I recommend it again and again. And Rebbe Nachman says like this: may I celebrate the holy festival of Pesach, the season of our freedom, with great holiness and with vast and intense joy. In your compassion, and he's speaking to Hashem and asking him here to help him and to help us, may we keep all the mitzvot of Pesach with great holiness, with vast joy and gladness. Then I will continue with a little bit more. May we celebrate the Pesach Seder with great enthusiasm, wondrous fervor, and again, vast and intense joy. Okay, so as we organize our homes and scrub and shop and balance budgets and keep people with chametzdika hands away from Pesach areas and so on, as we do this, we have to remember the goal. And the goal is to experience this endless, vast, huge, wondrous simcha that Rebbe Nachman speaks about. So I just wanted to begin with that. Now, the next part of my talk tonight is to speak about an aspect of the Seder I actually haven't spoken about before, and that is the Seder Plate. And I've done all the simanim of the Seder and the 4 questions and so on and so forth, but I've just never spoken about this. And while I do share with you what I've learned and things that I would like to share with you, I'd like you to keep in mind some other thoughts of Rebbe Nachman. He says essentially that the entire point of the Seder, okay, is to expand what we can translate as God consciousness, our awareness of Hashem, our connection to Hashem, our dot, okay? So that is the point of the Seder. Now, if you have a lot of children running around, please Hashem, you should have a lot of children running around, a lot of grandchildren running around. It should be a happy Seder, a joyful Seder. It still doesn't take away from this idea of experiencing a holy awareness of Hashem and really connecting to Hashem. If you're having a quieter Seder, it's a little bit easier to get into that mindset. Either way, rest assured, you are going to have the Seder that is perfect for you, the Seder that Hashem designed for you, based on what you've put into it. And the main thing to put into it is that mindset of joy, that mindset of being careful with halacha, but not making yourself meshuga, and so on, as I just spoke about. So I'm going to begin with the Seder Plate. And what I would like to tell you is that a lot of these ideas are, well, the whole ideas actually are from the Arizal, because he explains how they're connected to the Sefirot, each of the items. And I'm going to bring in Breslov, Rebbe Nachman's ideas, Rebbe Nassan's ideas as well. So I'm going to begin with the wine, which is technically not part of the Seder plate. The wine that we make Kiddush with. And I felt like it had to be there, but it's not one of the 10 Sefirot that's listed from the Arizal. The matzah represents, one of the matzot represents dot. And we know that when dot is expressed, keter is hidden and vice versa. It's dot and keter, sometimes they're considered quasi-sefirot, which I don't think is an accurate description. One of them will be present when the other isn't, and vice versa. So I thought about it, and it seemed to me that the Kiddush wine could be, in the 4 cups, could be keter. And the reason that I think is possible is because when we lift the wine, and we have 3 points during the Haggadah that we lift the wine, we have to keep the matzah, all the matzot, but we have to keep them covered. And therefore, dot, which is one of those matzahs, is being covered. So I would like to just make that suggestion to you. And this idea of keter is a crown, the divine crown. It's will and desire and its ultimate purpose. And as we go through the Seder, you will see, as we go through the Seder plate, you will see how these can be factored in at various points. Okay. So let me just begin with the matzah. Now, when we eat the matzah, it is considered to be matzah itself and the eating of the matzah, a segula, and a time to daven for emunah, refuah, faith, healing, and Mashiach. So make a little note, when you're just chomping away on the matzah, these are wonderful things to be silently davening for. Obviously, your mouth's full, okay? The Zohar says matzah is the food of emunah. It's the food of faith. And when we eat it, it says we should eat it with the awareness that only Hashem and no other is the source of everything. And we should eat it with relish for the sake of the mitzvah. I mean, not relish on, like a condiment, enjoyment for the sake of the mitzvah, okay? The Zohar also says matzah is the food of refuah, the food of healing. And eating matzah has the same power of bringing korbanot, which is the offerings. And the word korban is related to karov, to come close, just like the word kiruv. And when the Jews brought their offerings, they were, yes, thanking Hashem and or rectifying a transgression and so on. They were able to grow closer to Hashem. So when we eat matzah, inherent in the act of eating matzah is coming closer to Hashem, and it is a mitzvah that we do it out of love. Okay, there's not necessarily a common sense reason to do this mitzvah. Matzah is also, matzah is the food of a lot of things. I'm not going to go over them all. I know many of you will have heard of others. Matzah is also, though, the food of freedom. Matzah reminds us what true freedom is. My take on this is matzah reminds us of the ability to jump, do things in haste, and rush to serve Hashem, to not think too deeply, to not procrastinate, to not think of reasons why we should pause and take our time. Sometimes we have to. But matzah is all about haste. It didn't have time to rise. We were fleeing Egypt as we ate the matzah in haste and carried it on our backs. And I think that this really is advice that Rebbe Nachman gives us. He says, when a mitzvah presents itself to you, do not talk yourself out of it. Jump and do it, if at all possible. Obviously, if it's not possible, it's not possible. And if you get the urge to do a mitzvah, and he says sometimes we have these urges, it's not coming from the Yetzer Hara, usually. It's coming from the desire, again, to come closer to Hashem. Grab a hold of that and jump and do it in haste. Do that mitzvah. May not be perfect, but do it. Okay. Now, I'm going to share actually some pictures for you about how we set up the matzahs. So some people have, this is very popular in some Hasidic communities, this silver ka'ara with, you can see the little door handles here and 3 shelves inside that you can open, and 1 shelf for each matzah with the Seder plate built in on top. Okay, some people have a, let me find the Seder plate, a Seder plate, okay, and they wrap up the matzahs in a matzah decal, in a matzah veil or pocket, and they set it off to the side, and then they have the Seder plate separately. Okay, everybody has different customs. They're all valid and beautiful, and each one enjoys their own the most. And then some people, we happen to do this one. I'm not sure why we do it exactly. I should have asked my husband ahead of time. But there is something that I'll tell you what I thought of, is that we have something similar to this. You can see 3 tabs, 1 for each matzah, and there's 3 pockets inside. And we have a fabric on top. And then I put little bowls with the little items on there. And so everybody has their own customs. And one of the reasons I think that maybe we do our custom, I should have asked, is because this way the matzahs are actually cradling the items. But however you do it, it's all gorgeous and beautiful. And everybody has their own aesthetic and their own taste and their own choices and customs and so on. Now, the 3 matzahs represent the mochin, the intellect, the mind, the upper sefirot. Technically, they're not, they're holding or they're underneath or to the side of the Seder plate, but technically they're not the Seder plate. And they represent, the top one is the Kohen, and it also represents Avraham, and it represents Chachma, pure intelligence, pure wisdom. And it comes first. It's the top one. So we know Reishis Chachma, Yiras Hashem, which we say every day. Okay, the beginning of wisdom is fear of Hashem, is awe of Hashem. And this matzah is on top, and it has to be the leading matzah in order for all our other thoughts and ideas to follow. Okay, next we have the Levi. Okay, and we also, this matzah is also Yitzchak. So we have Kohen, Levi, and Yisrael, and Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And this Levi, this Yitzchak matzah is Bina. What is Bina? So sometimes we say Bina is intuition, which it is, but what Bina really is logical analysis. It's the ability to take disparate concepts, ideas, events, and make a connection between them, or different pieces of wisdom, to find a connection, to analyze, and to see the connection. For women who are said to have this special bina, this special intuition that we have, we are able to make lightning flash quick inferences from things that occur in our personal lives and put together a kind of logic. And it's often disparagingly referred to as women's logic, which is offensive in my opinion, because it is a different type of logic, and it is very often a logic that that is connected to our emotions. Okay, so there's different ways of expressing Bina. And this matzah is going to be broken. And a larger piece of this matzah is going to be the afikomen, which I think is a Greek word. And we eat this matzah at the end as our dessert when we're full, but not stuffed completely. We still have to have some enjoyment from eating this matzah. We have to be able to relish the mitzvah. And we eat this during the part of the Seder called safun, which means hidden, okay? And this hints to sod, the secrets, okay, which is why this is secrets of the Seder plate, the secrets and the times of Mashiach. And then, okay, so this is very spiritual and future concepts. Then we have the other half of the matzah, which we eat it at various points in the meal. This matzah, in the eating of the matzah, excuse me, this matzah, this general matzah represents the material, okay, the physical. So we give more credence, but by the bigger piece, to the spiritual. And it's, as we can see, again, this is related to Bina. It's about bringing two things together, and in this case, separating them. And we find the meaning in the separation in this particular expression of Bina. Okay, still holding two ideas, but understanding that despite the fact that our soul is in our body, the spiritual and the material ultimately, yes, they're together ultimately on the one hand, on the other hand, they're very different. Okay, then we're going to go to the third matzah. The third matzah is Yisrael, and we can say that it's Yaakov, and it represents Dot. And I spoke before about the wine, that this matzah will be covered when the wine is lifted, because the wine is keter and so on. And Dot is this, what I mentioned before, you could call it God consciousness, which I think is a term from the 70s, divine awareness of Hashem, a connection between what we see in the material world and Hashem's hashgacha, his supervision. And it's also the ability to articulate our thoughts, to communicate everything that just went on in our brains, okay? And this matzah makes korech, the Hillel sandwich, okay, which is the combination of matzah, which is, again, here, Dot, which gives us a kind of freedom to express, to express our wonderful ideas and thoughts that are rooted in Torah, and also maror, the bitter experience of slavery. And these come together in that sandwich. And that takes us, that sandwich actually takes us to a higher level of freedom. Okay, and as we go through and we speak about maror, you'll hear about that. Okay. Now, on the Seder plate itself, I'm just again going to quickly bring up the Seder plate so you can see the location of everything. I actually, when I was looking for pictures of Seder plate, I thought this was really interesting. There are two basic ways to lay out the Seder plate. This is the more popular. This is the Arizal's version. And then there's one, I think, from the Ramah. I don't know anyone who uses it, but I'm sure some people do. When I was looking for pictures of Seder plates, I noticed that some of them were made in different countries, let's say Eastern countries, and they had them in the wrong places. So they didn't match anybody's idea of a Seder plate. So we have on the right, the zeroa. On the left, we have the shank bone. On the left, we have the baits of the egg. And then in the middle here, we have the maror, the bitter horseradish root or bitter herb. We have the charoses here, which everybody loves, so delicious. We have the karpas, the humble vegetable here. And then we have the chazeres here. And there's reasons why it's laid out this way, and it has to do with the sefirot. So let's talk about the zeroa. So the zeroa represents chesed, which is loving kindness, generosity, and giving. And it represents an arm outreached, usually the right arm. And it is the arm of giving. It's the arm of love. It's the arm of chesed. And of course, we know that when we give tzedakah or we begin a specific good deed, we begin with the right and the right arm, the right hand. I would say that this links closely to the concept of a zamra, which is to look lovingly for the good in every situation, at every person, and to really be motivated by loving kindness, to really be motivated by love and generosity. In terms of customs, some people do use a shank bone. Many Hasidim use a chicken neck or a chicken wing, and they roast it very well, and some even pick off the meat because we want to make very sure that no way do we think that this actually is the Pesach offering. Okay, so when we go through naming the items on the Seder plate, we don't hold this up. Okay, we don't want for a moment to be the slightest confusion that we are today able to bring the Pesach offering. And Mitzvah Shem will be able to bring it in the future very, very soon. Okay, that's Chesed on the right. Okay, next we go to Beitza, egg, Gevura on the left. And Gevura, of course, is judgment, restraint, and inner strength. And this is a second offering, which is why people will put a hard-boiled egg on the plate, but many people also roast the outside of the eggshell. They'll sort of drop it on a burner until it gets a little brown. If it's a brown egg, until it gets a little darker brown. And this second offering, called the Chagiga, was brought to the Beis HaMikdash and eaten as the main course of the meal. And today, instead of a second piece of meat, we use this egg. Now, an egg is a symbol of mourning. And we have a symbol of mourning on our Seder plate to remind us of the destruction of the Holy Temple. The Talmud tells us that Pesach and the destruction of the temple are very much linked. The first day of Pesach falls out on the same day of the week as Tisha B'Av. We always know that one follows on the other. And so how do we have an egg as a representation of mourning? So one of the things is, I mean, there's a lot on this, but I'm going to be brief, is that the egg is potential life. The egg is not a developed life. And we know as Jews that the most precious thing is to have a life that's born, that's being brought and lived to potential, because only in that way, in an actual full-fledged life, not just a little egg, but the hatched egg, can we come to know Hashem? Can we come to know ourselves? Can we come to fulfill our individual and national life purpose? Our egg also represents the recognition that life ends, but life of the body ends. Okay, that's why, again, it's one of the reasons why it's a symbol of mourning, and also because it's round, and there's much more, but we're going to move ahead. Next, we have maror, okay, the bitter herb. And maror is Tiferet, okay, it's the sefira of Tiferet, that's what it represents, or Tiferet and maror. And it's very interesting because Tiferet is this amalgamation of Chesed and Gevura, and it is can be described as compassion, okay, which is an amalgamation of knowing when to give and when to have restraint. It also is harmony when things are working beautifully together. One hand watches the other, or so to speak. It represents truth, because truth contains everything. It's not just chesed or just gevura. And it represents beauty because beauty is truth. Beauty is compassion. Beauty is knowing when to give and when to restrain. You know, with a child, you give a child something because you love them, but you also know you don't give them too much. You don't want to spoil them or ruin their dinner or so on. Okay, because you have to give what somebody's capable of receiving with the level of intelligence at any stage of life. So that's one example. Now, maror, used for maror, many people use the grain, the horseradish root. Many people have the custom to use romaine lettuce, some just the white spears, or another bitter herb. Okay. So why bitter? Why bitter here? Shouldn't gevura be bitter? I was asking my questions going through this. So why wouldn't Tiferes be something, okay, if not totally sweet, sweet and sour? Why so bitter and harsh? So I actually think this is a hint to Mashiach, to the Messianic age, because then we will all see that what we thought was bitter and harsh and painful was actually good, was actually for our good. And we know in the Messianic age, we will be able to make the bracha, Hatov u'Meitiv, Hashem who is good and does good, on all the things that today we wouldn't consider them good. But then we'll have an understanding, we'll have that da'at more developed, and we will be able to experience the full sweetness, not only of chesed, but also of gevura. We'll understand why both have to be present. Now, Rebbe Nachman tells us that it's extremely helpful in life to develop equanimity and to trust that even if we can't be happy about the challenges and the painful events that we experience as individuals and we're experiencing as a nation, as a people, we should trust that there is beauty and truth and compassion even in there, okay? Even in these difficult things. Now, I would also like to mention that the maror is, I believe, a segula, an important segula, because Reb Nachman teaches us like this, that when we face enemies, when we face danger, when we face hardship, okay, this is chas v'shalom, we shouldn't face anymore, but this is a propitious time to grow spiritually and to recognize that what we're being put through is spiritual growth. And at that time, Reb Nachman says very directly, we should daven for abundance. Interesting. Here we are talking about spiritual. And yes, he's talking about spiritual abundance, but he's also speaking about material abundance as well. So as you're choking down the maror, okay, keep that in mind. And to also, he says, and he's not again linking this to maror, he's linking this to bitter hard times, but I'm linking it to maror. So I don't want to, this is something that I'm saying. I don't have a great source for it. I have just the inference and this connection that I see here is that he says like this: we should ask for chesed, for loving kindness, from the seichel hakolal, the universal mind, those three matzahs and the keter, okay, that directs all of creation. So the maror, this bitterness, is launching us back to the beginning, to keter, and then down to the matzahs. Okay, this connection with will and purpose. All right, now I want to quickly tell you a story. We have a few more minutes, and it's not going to take me much longer to get through these before our wonderful guest speaker. Rebbe Nachman tells a story. I'll make it brief. He tells a story of two tramps. I don't know if that's politically correct today, probably not. Who are two hobos. I don't even know if that's worse. And one's a Jew and one's a Gentile, and they are tramping around all over and getting people to give them food and drink and so on. And all of a sudden, it's almost Pesach. And the Jew says, let's go to a Jewish town because we're going to have the meal of our lives. The Pesach Seder is delicious. You're going to eat everything. You're not even going to believe it. So they go to shul, and one family takes the Jew and one family takes the Gentile, and the Jew says to the Gentile, listen, before you go, you can have a great time. You can eat a great meal. He says, I want you to enjoy yourself, but meet back here and we'll carry on from there. So the Jew goes, he has this fabulous meal. He's so happy. He has the Seder. He has 4 glasses of wine. He hasn't had that in so long. He comes back to the shul, and the Gentile's already there. And he says, oh, you're here a little early. And the Gentile says, what did you do to me? You played some trick on me. First, he says, I think we're sitting down to this gorgeous table. They make me eat a little bit of potato dipped in salt water, and then they give me this dry cracker and bitter herb. And he says, and how could you do that to me? And the Jew says, you fool, if only you had patience. You have to go through the little piece of vegetable and the lack and the bitterness. Okay, you have to go through that in order to get to the feast. Self-evident what this is. Okay, it's a lesson for all of us as we are holding on, waiting for Mashiach. Also, the bitterness as we take down that maror arouses Hashem's compassion because he sees us suffering with that bitter taste. And also this Tiferet, this truth and this beauty is building on this idea of following halacha, understanding the halacha, okay, which translates as laws, but it also means the path on which we walk in a way, in order to lead us to the next 2 items on the Seder plate, Netzach and Hod. Okay. So the first one is charosas, and that is the charoset is Netzach. People have different customs. Some are very rigid with their customs. I've gotten looser over the years. We'll try different fruit and so on. I enjoy it. And my husband's very whatever you want. So it's very pleasant. And Netzach means eternal victory and endurance. And karpas, the little vegetable, which I will talk about in a moment, represents Hod, splendor, humility, and empathy. Now, Rebbe Nachman teaches that Netzach and Hod go together. They lead from that Tiferet of halacha, because truth is Torah and beauty is Torah and harmony is Torah. They lead from that to something called halicha, which is walking, going. And the Rebbe teaches that when a person wishes to come closer to Hashem, to know Hashem, to feel that relationship in their lives, they must use the skills of going and coming, or running and returning. Okay, running is Netzach, running towards Hashem, and returning is Hod. Okay, running is putting that right foot forward, okay, moving forward, and climbing up. And Hod is knowing when it's time to take a step back. We can't just run in one direction. We certainly shouldn't take steps back all the time either. And the halacha is the fulcrum on which we base our goings and comings. Rebbe's very specific about that. We need to know what the parameters of how we go and come are. At the same time, we're driven by the yearnings of our heart. It's very beautiful. Now, Rav Yitzchak Ginsburg, wonderful Chabad Rav, who actually gave a wonderful course many years ago on these stories of Rebbe Nachman, says that the charoset represents the not just the building, because the charoset represents the mortar, the brick mortar, but represents Netzach because it's building the eternal Am Yisrael. And that's what it really represents in his commentary, which I thought was very beautiful. Okay. Netzach is forever. And it makes sense. The charoset is like mortar. It's building something hopefully permanent. It is never giving up. Main advice of Rebbe Nachman, one of the pieces of the top 10 greatest hits, don't give up. Hang in there. Know that you're here for the long haul. And another commentary on charoset, which I wanted to share with you, there were so many, and I'm just picking and choosing a little bit, is charoset sounds like chas rus or chas rut, which means mercy on roof. And it's interesting because, of course, Pesach is going to, we're going to start counting the Omer, and then we're going to end in Shavuot, the receiving of the Torah. And of course, we read Megillat Ruth on Shavuot, okay, because Ruth is the grandmother of King David, okay. And it's this link is so profound and so strong between Pesach and Shavuot that a couple of commentators have said that Pesach is like a Yom Tov, and even though we have a Chol HaMoed in between the first days and the last days, but they say that Pesach's like one part of Yom Tov. The the counting of the Omer is like a long Chol HaMoed, and the Shavuot is like the final days of Yom Tov. So they're very much linked. Okay, now let's go to Karpas, and we'll move along quickly now. Number 5 is Karpas, which is the Hod, which I mentioned, which is splendor. What is splendor? Interesting. Splendor is humility. Humility. That's what splendor is in Judaism. When you think of splendor in this world, like the big pomp and circumstance of the King Charles, who was just coronated, okay, with the ermine cloak and the red carpets and the 300-pound crown with the crown jewels, and by the way, he was even they take from us, they even anoint him with olive oil from Jerusalem, from Yerushalayim. All right, so that is the outward signs of splendor. We can get confused by this, but for a Jew, splendor is humility. And as a matter of fact, Jewish kings' main trait is humility. And that's why we have the karpas, the vegetable of very humble origin. Now, so I think the modern American one is parsley, okay? The Arizal used celery root, also called celeriac. Another one from, I guess, probably Eastern Europe roots was potato. Okay, cooked a little bit of cooked potato. I think some Hasidim use radish. Many have accustomed to avoid radish on Pesach. Chabad uses raw onion. We Breslovers don't eat raw onion because the Baal Shem Tov and Rebbe Nachman held that it says that it's sakana, it's dangerous to the health. We'll talk about that in another class. And but meanwhile, the idea is it has to be a humble little bit of nothing. Okay. And we dip it in salt water, of course, to represent our tears. And we also dip it simply. So why? So that the children at the table or the guests who maybe haven't attended a Seder like yours before are prompted to ask, why are we dipping? Why are we dipping in the water? Okay, there's so much more about karpas. I really just wanted to just do like an hour on karpas, but maybe another time. Okay, let's go down to chazeret. Okay, if you remember, that's at the bottom. That's number 6 of the lower sefirot. Chazeret is lettuce, even if you're using, some people again we use romaine or on endive in English. I think I always say endive. Endive for maror, some people will use, some people use it for chazeret. Whatever it is, you can use the same thing or you can use different things. But chazeret is a type of lettuce, any type of green. Somebody told me, I was just talking to somebody, I don't remember who told me she was going to use bok choy. Okay, I guess if you eat it raw, it's bitter. This is a second bitter green. And this is yesod. And yesod means foundation. And yesod means the Brit. Okay. That's what yesod is, the foundation of everything. And it's the Brit. And yesod is the tzaddik. Okay. Tzaddik yesod olam. The tzaddik is the foundation of the world. And this righteousness comes from guarding the Brit, okay, being very cautious in what one looks at. And this goes for women as well, and what one exposes, and so on and so forth. And the bitterness is related to everything that flows from not guarding the Brit. Ultimately, it embodies humility as well. It's interesting. It's a bit of lettuce. How could this represent the tzaddik? And again, this is an additional idea that the tzaddik is very humble. And Rebbe Nachman really models this for us. He said in a few places, I know nothing. And he proved throughout his teachings that knowing nothing and being able to admit it and to share with us, he knows that, is the highest form of knowing. Who knew more than the Rebbe? Yet he wasn't being modest or false modest. He was saying, I really know nothing. The more you know, the more you realize you know nothing. And this is again, it's such a little, it's like who needs an additional bitter herb? Because that's really what it is. Romaine it's quite bitter. So it's just kind of interesting that we have that as the foundation. And finally, what is malchut? Okay, malchut, sovereignty, royalty. Malchut can mean receiving. It's a channel for giving out from all the other sefirot into the world, and it can also be a channel for reception, for receiving, because kingship has to receive from its subjects. So Malchut is also Emunah, because it's about that relationship between the king and his subjects, or us and Hashem. And it's the place where action happens. So what is Malchut here? We covered all the items on the Seder plate. So they say that it is either the Seder plate itself, which again is receiving, it's holding everything, or if you have that decal, that sort of matzah cover that we put the food directly on, like we do, it's the table itself, okay? Because we know the matzot are the mental faculties. And this really is faith. This is where the action happens. When we sit around that table, okay, when we fuss over and make that Seder plate and arrange everything on it, we are engaging in the highest expression of emunah, because we're doing this because we're told to do it. This is how you relive the Exodus. This is how you live your own Exodus. Rebbe Nachman said that through emunah, again, malchut is emunah, through faith, you can rise to all levels. You can go up to all levels and attain desire and will. In other words, we come full circle back to, I suggest, keter, divine desire and will, right back to the beginning, to the source. Now, as you sit down at the Seder, and you know that if you're the woman here, you're probably busy making sure that everybody's happy and serving and arranging. Take time for yourself, if possible, before you sit down, the day before, the day of. Make sure you get a nap. Take time for yourself to review. I have so many Haggadahs, but I like to put a little little marker at a specific point here or there to remind me to be present and to take what I've learned. And I learn each year something new, to take it and bring it into the Seder with me, even if it's only momentarily in my mind and my heart. And keep the excitement going for yourselves, for your children, for your grandchildren, for the rest of your family. And please, Hashem, may Pesach truly be the time of our final redemption and a